Welcome, everyone, to Indegene Digital Summit 2022. I'm Sandeep Gantodi, Associate Vice President of Indegene Enterprise Medical, and I'll be your moderator for today's session titled Medical Omnichannel Engagement Transitioning from Strategy to Real World Implementation. This is an important topic as many of us today are looking at evaluating omnichannel strategies within our organizations. We felt it would be useful to take a departure from the theory and actually have some real conversations about experience on the ground. With me today are three medical affairs leaders who are enabling omnichannel capabilities within their respective organizations. In no particular order, I'd like to invite them to join me on the panel virtually and introduce themselves. First up, we have Michael Cavanaugh.
Good morning, good afternoon, Sandeep. So Mike Cavanaugh, I'm from Boehringer Ingelheim Pharmaceutical in the U.S. organization in medical affairs. My experience includes starting out in medical, working on clinical trials for a number of years. I also spent a number of years on the commercial side, doing everything from sales and marketing effectiveness to marketing operations. I also headed up 5 respiratory brands for a number of years. I recently came back to medical affairs a few years ago and head up our scientific communications and strategic engagement function. Glad to be here.
Great. Thank you, Michael. Next, I'd like to call up Andrew Ferriello.
Good day, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Andrew Ferriello, and I'm with AstraZeneca. I'm on the global medical affairs side in the oncology business, and I lead a group of medical excellence, of which our oncology digital medical innovation team is part of it, where we're driving our digitalization in medical and our omni-channel efforts.
Great. Thank you, Andrew. Great to have you. And finally, we have Christian Belton.
Yes, hello, good morning, good evening, everybody. My name is Christian Felten, Roche Pharma. I have a bit of a history in medical affairs, done nearly everything you can do, perhaps except controlled clinical trials. Lately, I was heading the medical customer experience department in our global medical affairs organization. And since a few months, I'm a new role as strategic lead, digital customer experience.
All right, great. Thank you. So very happy to have all of you today and looking forward to a great conversation. Just for our audience to know that there's a couple of polling questions that will be actively running through the session. We will not be stopping and pausing to do polling, but the interface will be active to you throughout. And we encourage you to go and interact there. And we'll be revealing those answers towards the end before we get into some of the Q&A and the discussion. So without further ado, let's get right to it. So the first theme I'd like to talk about is probably one of the most basic questions, at least in interactions that I've had. A simple question, but sometimes maybe the most elusive one. So the question is really about what is the business challenge that your organization is trying to actually solve by implementing omni-channel strategies? And I'd like to direct this one to Michael to kick us off.
Yeah, no, thank you. And that is a tough one because when you start out with thinking about it from a medical affairs perspective, it's a little bit different. I think the first step that you really need to take is define what omnichannel means for medical affairs and medical in general. When you think about the history behind it, it started in the retail space and really, about how to best conduct that. Pharma has adopted it into the commercial space, which helps with the promotion of products and makes a lot of sense there. When you get to the medical affairs side, it's a little bit different. Here, when you think about what our role is, it's to share information that we have that's important for the treatment of patients. And, that is not so much around promotion, but it's making it available in different ways, whether it's through a congress or publications or MedInfo or whatever it is. And then the second, and this is equally as important, is how do you work with the company? On the medical side, we have folks that are applying for grants. We have people that want to be investigators. We have ad boards, authors, all these different things. And how do you make that happen? So when you think about omnichannel for medical, it really if you want to keep it simple and you really want to make those things happen, there's an awareness factor in making sure that people can find the information that we have and find it in the way they want, where they want. There's an ease of finding that information. So how do you make sure that you seamlessly can get from a web page to an MSL, or from MedInfo follow up with an MSL? All these ways to ensure that this happens. And then the third way is an ease of navigation of the organization. If you want to work with the organization, how do you make it really simple to do and kind of take off those friction points to ensure that happens? And all those require that you do it seamlessly between the web, in person, and other means that you may have. So I guess in a nutshell, I would kind of sum it up that way.
Great. Thank you, Michael. Invite Andrew or Christian to add any other thoughts from their perspectives as well.
Thanks, Sandeep. I would agree completely with Michael that the engagements that medical teams have are obviously a little bit different than our other colleagues in the organization. I think we straddle the balance between we're not trying to create a separate omnichannel environment and ecosystem for medical from the rest of the organization. We don't have the skills or horsepower to do that. So how do we work within the organization's infrastructure to really understand the HCP better and their preferences and the like, and then look at how we do the things that Michael is saying is make the information that they're looking for more readily available, a better customer experience, and that we can learn from where they're going and what they're seeking so that we can understand their perspectives better and that we can provide our services in a way that's more responsive to them and able to cut through the noise of all the other stuff that they're trying to deal with. So that's the balance. That's our goal, is try to have a single Omni, which sounds great in principle, but really figure out how we do the medical pieces within a broader ecosystem.
Yeah, I can just plus one, both Mike and Andrew. For me, omnichannel, and I think I can definitely also speak for Roche. It's not just a commercial concept. It's a way to engage with our external stakeholders. Some call them customers in the digital space. That's what it is. The challenge, where I still can't provide you, and we are playing and trying a lot of things to make it happen, but I still cannot provide you with the way to achieve, is how can we help each individual colleague to understand what it means for her day-to-day reality, for his day-to-day work, sitting at the desk and doing what they always have done. This is providing the inspiration and achieving this kind of behavioral shift towards more considering the digital space. This is really challenging.
Right. No, that's a great point, Christian. Actually, a nice segue into sort of the next theme that I wanted to talk about today. Apart from technical capability and platforms and analytics and all of that, there is definitely a softer human side to all of this, in terms of how we work and how we change the way we work. Andrew, I'd just like to direct this one to you, and this is around organizationally, when implementing omnichannel capabilities, it is a change in the way that we work. It's uncomfortable times. It's different. Could you talk a little bit about some of the things that you've done in your organization in terms of getting people to collaborate, taking them along the journey, and sort of helping smooth out some of those friction points?
Yeah, thanks, Sandeep. So obviously it's a journey, and it's a long journey, probably a bit longer of a journey than pharma norms are around projects and initiatives. And I think there's a bit of adapting to that. I think early on, getting people excited about the prospects and the promise of an omnichannel experience is exciting and somewhat easy. You can get the excitement easy. Then when they start to really understand a little bit more of what it takes to do it, then you get this is like 5 stages of grief, right? Then they get into the, oh my gosh, could you really do that? And then you start to make some progress and people can start to see, a light at the end of the tunnel. But it's much longer than we're used to. And I think one of the big challenges I face is how do we keep our stakeholders engaged along the journey with us? Because the the milestones are not always things that are easily understood and easily as visible along the way, as they're used to seeing and other things in typical ways of working. And so being able to demonstrate that, you look at the journey to do modular content and taxonomy and tagging medical content is for us, it's been a multi-year journey, and we're making great progress. We're creating great efficiencies for how we build our content and the like, but that's not an easily visible, tangible thing to team members and to stakeholders. So I think able to get good at showing the milestones in a way that non-digital natives will understand is important to keep the support and the momentum on a long-term journey like that. I think the other piece is, as Christian was mentioned, like this is not what people are used to doing every day. It's not how they work, and they're very busy. They want to help, but being able to really make it clear to them how they need to work differently, what they need to work into their lives and their schedules and other things that might drop is a big challenge. Obviously, there's a big complex training program that has to go around building the basic technical skills, the differences in the ways of working and the like. And then we're looking at it from the standpoint of like, what are the pieces we have to build globally and then what are the pieces the countries will drive themselves. At the end of the day, our hope is that the countries are driving the omni-channel activities. They are closest to the customers and they are closest to the needs within their markets. We're trying to create the infrastructure, the ecosystems that can work for them. But getting the local teams around you to almost do your road shows and your constant communications with them and hopefully build some milestones with them that they can feel some momentum with, that they can continue to keep the energy with you. But to me, this is one of the biggest challenges I faced in my career is just a transformation on this scale over this type of time period is something we hadn't really done before. And we're on the journey. We're not at the end of it to say, oh, we're successful. We've got successes, but it's a constant process.
Thank you, Andrew. I had a follow-on question, but I'd like to invite Michael or Christian to add to what Andrew said.
I like this picture of the journey. I have a little bit of history of digital and medical and agnostic. What I started to dislike is a way of working and thinking, okay, we are doing our business, and then we have the digital stuff. Mm-hmm. So sometimes there is a little bit the temptation to outsource the digital to specialists, to dedicated teams, to whatsoever. I'm more and more coming to the conclusion that the best way is this needs to work in an integrated way. And I know exactly what I'm talking about because currently one of the things I'm involved is working closely with the digital squad that is focusing on one of our upcoming product launches. And I see it. So it's very easy to say conceptually what needs to happen, and we have a lot of great people doing excellent things across the company. Challenge number one is to ensure that this happens in the connected way, and challenge number two is ensure that this happens in a business integrated way and not outsource somewhere and then it does not map. Do we need a digital strategy? I was building a digital strategy in one of my companies before. I'm not so sure anymore because actually there is a disease or product strategy and a digital component should be included. There shouldn't be a separate digital strategy. It should all follow the same priorities. And all I can say is with working with this, with feet on ground, it's a journey and sometimes it's a painful one, but it's worth the effort.
Yes. Great.
I'll add on top of what Christian said. I agree with everything that he stated. I think taking that customer-centric view and starting, this is, the way we do business. That's a little bit different. Now, this isn't unique to medical, but I've seen it somewhat more acute. We're used to doing business in silos. So you give out information from the call center, you work with grants, you do work with investigators, MSLs work out there. Tying those together into an experience that helps and you think about the customer first is difficult. And that takes a lot of culture change to make that happen. And that can both take some time and effort to start having that. I think combined with that, traditionally, if you think about what we've done because of resources with segments, personas, building these out and really understanding your customers well, that takes brand new competencies that you really don't have within medical, but you do have within your organization. And you ensure that you try and pull those in to the extent that you can. So that can be a bit tricky, and that's a rather large change. Again, not unique to medical affairs, but it is something that we are struggling with.
No, absolutely. I think if I look at the combined experience on this call, we're looking at probably 100 years worth of combined experience. And I know, at least when I started my career, we're artists in a way. We're with data, right? We are painting sort of a picture, a clinical picture. We're trying to engage with the ATP and the patient care. But today, and I just reflect on my own experience, I've had to become a little bit more of a technologist, right? And which is not something I've been classically trained in. So it's definitely, it is going to take a bit of work to get there. And but I think I agree. I think the opportunity is definitely worth it.
Well, I think
I just wanted to
add to that. Just one short comment is that, if you think about it historically too, we've been a fairly field MSL focused organization as medical affairs in general. And look, the field is an incredibly important asset for us. But what we have to do now is expand into other ways of working. And that's, shifting from slide deck field focus to digital multi-channel, multi-segment focus. That's a tough shift. And that's something else that we look at as we start to move and evolve as an organization.
Absolutely. Yeah. I wanted to build on something as Andrew was speaking. So we have obviously, companies have invested a lot of time in platforms and training and education, communication to kind of get everyone together as a community. I know even, if we take Omnichannel out of the picture and we're just looking at straightforward deliverables that we're accustomed to working with, different markets will have different regulatory needs for sure, right? There are certain standards that come into play where you'll have to have some variation. But I know from even a cultural perspective, some markets are resistant to change more so than others, or it's a little bit more uncomfortable. There's some unique factors that come in. When you have a large multinational organization, and this is more of a comment and a question to the larger group, at some point, I guess, we all kind of have to land on something that we're all going to work together with, right? I don't know that everyone can have everything exactly the way they want. So just wanted to throw it out. Any brief comments on some of those aspects that you've had to navigate within your organizations?
My question would be, do we actually always have to do it the same way everywhere? And yes, and we're touching a little bit the field of compliance and local, different healthcare systems in regions or countries. I think for someone working on the global layer, I had to learn to get rid of this thinking we need the same approach around the globe. Why? Certainly there needs to be a balance between reinventing the wheel over and over again. So maximize the impact and the value of the assets and of the approaches, and some kind of standardization and harmonization. Certainly this is required. We want to work efficiently with our resources, fully agreed. But we should be very careful with too slavely following the standardization approach, because something that works in Germany will not work in the UK. Something that works in Spain will not work in France, and vice versa. And this is something to be considered. And I wouldn't like to end up in a situation that the most limiting market is setting the standard for all. This is a little bit risk, and I think this is to be avoided.
Yeah, just to build on Christian's comments, I think with the approach that we've been taking to try to address that is the great ideas and the energy are coming from from the markets. And if they're going to build something that's going to work, like, it's best to work with them on the idea where they have energy. And as long as we can build it around an archetype and an architecture that is standard, then I think then we can really see how far it can go, and there's the greatest likelihood of success. And that's the approach we've taken, at least in our early days, from an accelerator model, is picking the markets that have the best energy and the best ideas and the resources that want to run with it and get some momentum and experience. And then our goals are to learn from those and then scale to the next wave of markets.
Yeah, and just to comment on top of that, I agree with both what Andrew and Christian had said. I do think that balance between standardization, the most efficient way to go is standardize everything. The most effective for our customers, the wishes, is to make it ultimately customizable. Yes. Where you sit in that balance between the two is that's the art of the whole thing, and that becomes a bit difficult. The only thing I'd add on top of that is that there are times where using standard tools that have started in the commercial organization many times works, but there are a number of times that either A, they won't work, or B, they need to be modified from the original intent in order to work within the medical situation that we're applying it to. And that at times can be hard for people to understand because, it's been brought in as one thing and you're kind of modifying it to another. And that can be a bit tricky globally to have that both understood and endorsed.
Thank you for those great reflections. Clearly a work in progress for all of us, I think. Okay, I'm going to move to the third theme that I wanted to cover today. This may be the most burning question for many of us today. As organizations invest time, effort, budget, etc., what does good look like, right, at the end of all this, right? And I know, just building off of some of the comment before, we're in a journey. It's not that we've reached our destination yet, but as we're moving along, how do we kind of know we're moving in the right direction? And how do we communicate the value of what we're doing with omnichannel approaches with our organization at large? And I'd like to just direct that question to Christian.
Yeah, thank you very much. Happy to answer. And it's very simple. Make it real. And then I can stop. Simply make it real. Sometimes we are a little bit on the way of speaking about concepts and ideal worlds and castle in the clouds and what works for Amazon. I'm coming back to what I mentioned before is people, all our colleagues need to understand how it matters for them. So it, for me, is communicate in a way that's in context of the business, that's in context of our colleagues, that's in context of their day-to-day work, that's in context of the disease and the therapy, because that's where the experience happens at the end of the day, and focus on the impact and the value created for patients, for HCPs, for our affiliates. And also for the global teams, where at the end HCPs and patients decide what is the most impactful and successful channel, because those are the ones they use, right? And I would pick up again something Mike has mentioned before, something I very closely focus on the internal storytelling is that everything we do should start with listening. If you don't know what the customer needs, how can you serve it? And with this listening piece, I think, and those commercial colleagues included, Nicole might please generously forgive me. In my impression, medical has a little bit a head start. It's a little bit closer to what especially the HCPs really need. And keep in mind, we have our companies, and this is our big advantage compared to Uber, Amazon, and so on and so forth, you name it. We have people in the field who are talking to the customer every single day, face to face. This is real. I mean, this is not, data is important, is key, but you will find also statements by Jeff Bezos where he says, if you have contradicting findings, listening findings, one based on the data and one anecdotal by talking to someone, you might want to strongly consider the anecdotal because this is real. And this also helps people to understand. So, in a nutshell, have a clear enterprise and vision. And vision, that's why I assume that's why. Tell a clear, compelling, and business-relating story. Tell the story over and over again, and then share best practices. And I'm not sure if it was Andrew or Mike who said it before. I would like to build on that. It would be my final comment. It's easier for our colleagues to adopt pieces that work already. So if I show up and I come with a kind of an example what I would like to do with the most promises of the world, it will be hard to convince, for example, the German affiliate. And sorry, German affiliate guys, if you include it, it's just randomly picking out some examples. But if something works in France and it works well, it's much easier for our German colleagues to pick it up. I'm not. Let's talk a little bit about jealousy. That something works somewhere else. Let's agree it's simply easier to pick it up if there's a proof of concept, and this needs to be told over and over again.
Thank you, Christian. Some very practical experiential points. Michael or Andrew wanted to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think I want to pick up on something that Christian said that's so important, which is the storytelling aspect. As you think through it, and you can take any example, and I'll just use one. If you look at publications from years ago, it was all about manuscripts, abstract, poster, and you went from there. But now you've looked at the transformation just in that space alone, where now you're looking at digital posters, you're looking at infographics, you're looking at audio versions, you're looking at patient authors, you're looking at lay summaries. Like all these things have evolved to multi-channel ways of communicating information. And you're also including social in there to the extent that we can, to make sure that, and this is all done with that initial or that foundation of saying, we have important information to share that can help you to treat your patients, and making it available to them in the way that they want to. Now, the good news about that is not only is that a great story about providing value and doing what you're intending to do, but also as you start to go into a more digital format and others, it becomes more measurable. So you can look at it and say, well, now we know how many people have downloaded our posters. Now we know how many people have done this. And you start to combine that with some of the alt metrics that you have, and you start to have a story to tell. As we build upon those, then you start to say, how do we leverage those assets and infographic into other things that we do and make it more efficient so that we're not paying once and not using multiple times. So this stuff starts to build on each other, and it's really exciting when it does, and it's a great story to tell. And where we've done it and we've told that story, people want more. So that's that's good.
Great. Andrew, I know you wanted to look like you were going to say something as well.
Yeah, no, I agree with the comments, and I think Michael, put an exclamation point on it. When you start to see the actual usage and you see the data, are they using the channels that we're building? Are they coming back? Those numbers speak for themselves. And I think just there to be able to show the engagement you have and the breadth of a broader reach than maybe medical teams ever would have achieved through the traditional channels, and even the HCP responses, if you survey them on the results, like those they tell a lot, and you have to be objective and to it, and can't get too married to what you've built, and be able to adapt and change based on where you see good success and maybe not as much as you thought you would have.
Thank you for all of those comments. I just wanted to add one more thing, and I just quickly like the panel's thoughts on this. One of the words that comes out a lot when we have these discussions is impact, right? We want to create impact by engaging through omnichannels to when we engage with customers. If I take that word and kind of dissect it a bit, impactful engagement, does that mean that we're reaching more people? Is that of value? Is it more about the customer experience? So the people who are engaging with us are satisfied with this service they got or the journey that they had. And like each of you just may take a few seconds and give me your thoughts on what you think about that word and what does it mean for you.
Yeah, I'm happy to start off. When I think about impact, it is somewhat journey specific. So if it comes to somebody that is treating a patient and they have a question about, the appropriateness of our medications, that impact is speed by which you get that answer to them and the answer that they need to make that choice. So that becomes all about the access to the information in the way that they need it and how they want it, and speed by which you get it to them. And that becomes somewhat measurable because you can use a 5-star scale or something to kind of get a sense around that. There are other times where it's a much longer journey, when it comes to working with somebody for a grant or something like that, and contracting or something. That experience through the interaction with, in this case, BI, and how you kind of make that happen, and how you've worked with them in different ways, both digital and non-digital, to help with that. It's a longer process, but it becomes, hey, if I have a proposal I'm going to put forward and I have 4 choices to make, I'm going to choose BI because I enjoy working with them and they have an easy way to work with them as well as good science. So it is somewhat journey specific from my perspective.
Sure. Great.
I think we could spend all day talking about impact of medical teams and the challenges of measuring that, right, and the like. But I think Mike said it well. I think getting an HCP to get the information they need when they need it in the format they need it, so they can make the decisions they want, is really what we're after. The traditional channels are great; they're impactful as well, but there's oftentimes a delay from when HCP might have a question and when they might actually get to talk to somebody in a company, and that comes in and we can formulate a response. Like, that's not the way information is shared these days. Everybody wants their information and answers when they need it. That could be any time of day or night, in different formats, and being able to be there where they're going is absolutely what we're after.
Yeah, and building on that from my side, yes, they are channel-specific metrics, and the specialists will use them. I'm trying to have a little bit of view on, well, do people like to be engaged with us? So does an investigator like to work with us? Is an HCP satisfied with the information he's provided with? And satisfied means not that we are bombarding them. Do they exactly get what they need? Does a patient feel comfortable with our treatment and the way, let's say, the package around this treatment and the information around this treatment? And this is a more holistic perspective, which goes beyond measuring single channels, and there are measures for that in place. I just had an internal meeting on that earlier today, and we try to implement this very consistently. The important question for me with all impact success metrics is, what the heck are we going to do with it? Is this ending up with, oh, we have such a high NPS score, we are so great, yeah, best organization ever? This has no, but what's the value of that? I always try to ask, okay, you're measuring, but for what? So what is the action you intend to see afterwards? What is triggered based on what you measure? What are the behaviors you would like to change, externally as well as internally? I think this is a real challenge with all the metrics, that we essentially might use them to cheer ourselves, but instead of really using them to learn how we can get even better.
Great. We've got quite a few questions coming in. What I'd like to do is, I know we're running short on time here. I'm curious to see the survey results. So if we could put those up on the screen there. Let's see. The first question was, what do you believe to be the greatest opportunity for omnichannel approaches in medical affairs? Majority of people are saying enhancing the quality of interaction with medical affairs customers, what they want, where they want it. So very much in line, I think, Andrew, with what you were talking about, and echoed by the other participants as well. And we have insights as well coming in, learning about our customer. Yeah.
I think one thing on that though is if you do the enhance the quality of
Yeah.
interaction, you also get the insights.
Correct.
So, one feeds off the other, which by the way, then helps you with quality. So
So
it is a bit of a
yeah.
cycle, and that's an
Yeah.
important aspect of it.
Yeah. So I think it comes full circle, doesn't it? It's about listening first and being customer first. And this certainly validates that. Just going to quickly look at the next one here. This is on sort of the greatest obstacle that people are perceiving. And the two biggest ones here, compliance concerns. Not surprisingly, we've got a few questions on that. I want to see if we can get to those. And the other one there, I can't visualize what an omni-channel experience looks like. So this kind of speaks to Christian, what you were talking about. What does it mean to me, and how does my work change? So very, very consistent with what the audience is seeing as well. Very interesting. Okay. We've got a few questions that are kind of going across operations. One is there's a few on compliance. Why don't we tackle one of the compliance ones? The question is, are you worried that creating medical omnichannel engagement strategies may be perceived as being too commercial? Maybe, Christian, you want to maybe take that one on, the compliance standpoint, your impressions?
No, I am not, provided it's done the right way. And I think, again, for me, perhaps allow me to get back to my perspective. For me, there is no medical and non-medical engagement. There is just engagement with the customer. And for the customer, we all show up the same. And honestly spoken, we all should follow the same rules, independent if I'm in a commercial or medical role. In reality, and the people working in medical functions might have a higher sensitivity. Sometimes, I'm afraid to say, a better understanding what it really means and requires in the details. There sometimes I see a risk that this is seen as protecting your medical silo with the compliance. The key is for me is that it could be helpful for everybody to take the perspective, independent what your division is, to see compliance as an enabler. So it's not a bug, it's a feature, because compliance helps us simply to do the right things. It makes my life easier because I can cut off all the things which I'm not allowed to do. So it helps me to focus. And with every piece I was doing during my career, at least during the last 6-7 years, especially in the digital space, my first stop was always with compliance, asking, okay, this is what I would like to do. Can you please define the playground? If you do something, develop something, then show up at the end and compliance says no, or legal says no, I have to say, no surprise. Don't blame others, your fault. Have the first stop with compliance. Tell them what is my playground, and then on this playground, like in a soccer game, you can play your full creativity, but you have some guardrails, and it's okay. In the digital space, and another challenge might be the GDPR regulations. So this was also mentioned in the question before, and in the responses in the survey. They have a very clear opinion. If you are working on omni-channel strategy and digital channels and whatsoever, but your concentrate is 20%, then please stop everything and put all your energy and efforts in increasing the concentrate. Because without the consent for being engaged according to those rules, you anyhow can't do anything. And this is where we put a lot of focus in our previous company. We put a lot of focus in your consent is kind of, it's the oil of the machine of omnichannel. Without it, the machine will get stuck and stop working.
Great. Thank you, Christian. Very, very practical examples you gave there. I'm going to go to another question. This is more of an operational one. Maybe Andrew, I'll ask you to maybe comment on this. So the question is, do you encourage omni-channel planned rollouts across countries at once, or each country in their own time, and how do you kind of manage that? I know that's a loaded question, but if there's a short kind of version of that, I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, I think it's going to be very company specific as well as to what what their ambitions are and how they operate. For us, we don't have the capacity to roll out all at once. And like I mentioned earlier, we've been trying to build the foundations and the ecosystems at the right sequence, but then roll out based on where the markets really want to drive their initiatives and work with them to be able to do that. So that's just the approach that we've taken based on we are, but it might be different from company to company.
Sure. Michael, here's a question, maybe just drawing on some of your past experience. You've kind of done so many different things. The question is, how do you segment the HCPs in medical? So, for example, in commercial, they segment by prescription deciles, demographic, risk tolerance, attitude, etc. In the medical side, any things that you've seen or that you've implemented in terms of segmentation? You had any
Yeah,
thoughts?
I mean that is a really loaded question because there's a lot of thought around that, and people get constantly challenged with how to do it. I think if you think about it though, that's at its simplest way, if you know that there's an educational gap, which is very appropriate for medical to fill through the programs that we do, both sponsored as well as grants that we give. And you understand within those customers why that gap exists. So they could exist for a different, reason. One could be a lack of understanding of whatever that disease is. Another could be a lack of understanding around mechanisms of action. Whatever it is, you're able to then say, all right, we acknowledge the gap exists. We acknowledge that different physicians or HCPs have different reasons for those gaps. Let's start to work on programs that will fill that knowledge gap. And again, in this case is not product specific. It's more disease education based. And then you can start to target programs toward those HCPs. All right, well, there are ways that you can analyze what those understandings are based on research that you do and projections. Sometimes it does include things like claims data, which I think is totally appropriate. You usually would go to a class basis as opposed to a product basis. But once you do that, you can target programs and then you can start to measure the closing of that gap. That becomes very much more actionable than that peanut butter approach that I talked about before, which is you throw a bunch of money into grants and do some symposiums and call it a day. So there are ways that you can start to do this, and that's just one example. But there are ways that you can start to, as you think through it, it's not going to be perfect, but you're on a journey to get better.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Absolutely.
I think it also gets in some of the, sorry, Sandeep.
No, go ahead, please.
Michael's comments. It gets at also some of the other compliance questions as well, right? One is like, how do we get to an agreement of what personas and journeys are that work in the medical environment? And I agree exactly with Michael's point. The other thing is, how do you share data and what's appropriate to share and not share, given much of the engagements for medical teams are responding to requests for information that is not in the label. And that needs to be worked out in the company, both from a data privacy standpoint, but also from a compliance standpoint as to what levels go to the algorithms, what levels go to individuals of data. And there are real and perceived challenges within each of those that I think each company needs to work through. When you get to things like the commercial omni-channel initiatives that are in place today, which are, at least in our experience, very much promotionally focused, one of the questions came into is like, well, how do you link a medical into that? There are points along that journey where HCPs often will want to seek additional information and different from the company, and often that's medical. And so as long as you have the appropriate way that when they need that information, they can link into the medical channels and get that, then you can definitely have an integrated system where it's not medicating separate from the commercial organization.
That's a really important point. I think that's one of the things that we have to make sure that we do a better job, what Andrew just said, which is, how do you go from, for example, HCP with a rep has a question, you get it to the call center, an MSL follows up, and you close the loop with the rep, not what was discussed, but that it happened and that they were satisfied. That journey right there is easy said, but harder done.
All right. There's so many great questions. We have run out of time, unfortunately. We could maybe have to do a part 2 or something. I'd be very happy to consider that. I want to just firstly thank the entire faculty for lending us your valuable time and expertise and experience. And I want to thank the audience for being very interactive, submitting some great questions. While I have to bring this session to a close, IDS is running for the rest of today and tomorrow. So I invite all of you to fully participate as much as you can, and enjoy a wonderful day at Indegene Digital Summit. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye for
Thank
now.
you.
Very much for having me.
Take
Bye.
care.